there's an entire area that we haven't spoken of that's called cognitive behavioral therapy. I mentioned it briefly, but I do want to double tap on that really quickly, because this is a non-pharmacological way that works better than pharmacy. So there's a lot of data. I mean, we're talking over 100 studies looking at cognitive behavioral therapy, or how we think about sleep changes our way to sleep. So a lot of people say to me, it's like, oh my God, Michael, if I don't get 8 hours, it's going to rip off years off the back end of my life, or, my whole day is going to be ruined. That's called catastrophizing. And that's something that we look at in cognitive behavioral therapy to help people think differently. Because here's the bottom line. When you get less anxious about sleep, you sleep better. 75% of sleep problems are anxiety on the insomnia side of things, I would argue. And so once we can figure out ways, shapes, and forms to get people to slow down, de-stress, their sleep gets a lot better.
It's so interesting you say that, because I feel like with the advent of wearables and being able to track things, I almost feel that paradoxically, some of the anxiety that we have around sleep has almost gotten worse, where you have someone that'll look, let's say, at their phone and say, oh, I'm only getting an 85, or a 70 or whatever, and I should have gotten a 95 in order to be peak performance, versus auto-regulation, versus saying, how do I feel? Because sometimes, and I love the OURA ring. I'm not, but this is the one I use. So sometimes it'll tell me, oh, you didn't sleep well last night, or you're restless or whatever. And I feel like $1,000,000. So I'm like, I'm still going to go and do all the things that I was supposed to do today. I'm going to still do my workout, still get my sun in the morning, but I'm checking in with myself, and I still, rate that, let's say, higher than what the algorithm is punching out, or what it's spitting out at me. And not to say that it's not accurate, I think.
Oh, no, it's not accurate. Let's be very clear. Sleep is a complicated process. I mean, think about it, Steph. When we put people in the sleep lab, and I'm sure you've ordered sleep studies on your patients before, right? 27 electrodes, 2 respiratory belts, video cameras. How do you think we can get all that into one ring, right? It's impossible. So we all have to understand a few things about sleep tracking. Number one, it ain't going to be that accurate. The best one on the market actually turns out to be the OURA ring, because they did head-to-head studies. OURA and Fitbit are the two that have actually done the best for falling asleep, waking up, and total sleep time as measurements. OURA then went on and matched against what's called full nighttime polysomnography. So that's actually a sleep study, and they're 85% accurate to full PSG, which is pretty good when you think about it. I mean, collecting data off of her finger and being able to algorithmically get there, I think, can be helpful. But you also kind of talked a little bit about something that's called orthosomnia. So this is a situation where people track themselves to death, okay? They're like, oh, crap, I got an 89 and I didn't get a 92 today. Like, relax, okay? Sleep it's got fuzzy borders, okay? It doesn't have to be a precise event every single day, every single time. You don't have to worry about how much did you clock or did you not clock. Your body's a really good determinant of what's going on with itself. When I wake up in the morning, I just kind of ask myself, 1 to 5, where do I feel? If I'm at anywhere from a 3.5 higher, I'm in good shape,
yeah.
right?
I love that. Yeah.
It's like, I think things are going kind of well, right? And so again, I want people to be very, very clear. Tracking can be helpful if you're trying to monitor something in particular, or if you just want to get a general idea. But to be very fair, if a patient turns to me and says, hey, Dr. Breus, I'm checking my ring every day, I say, take it off, okay? Stop, relax. You're anxiously making your sleep even worse with your level of anxiety and your OCD, because a lot of people are kind of OCD, especially when it comes to things like sleep optimization and things of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Let's talk a little bit about chronotypes, because I know you've written the book on it. And
I kind of did.
Yeah. You'd be the guy to ask. So I know that we've all kind of heard of a night owl, an early bird. Let's talk about what a chronotype is. My team is, so I have a fully remote team, and I know that, for example, myself, I'm usually up and kind of up and at it at about 7. I have some members on my team that They are not on Slack. They are not available until about 10 a.m.
Those are the wolves.
So let's talk a little bit about, and then I want the one I'm thinking of in particular. She kind of takes a break midday. So she starts at 10, takes a break midday, and then she has her best work at night. So she will be like, I've signed off. My brain is dead at about 4 or 5 o'clock. And then she is like working 7, 8, 9, 10. She'll come up with a new website the next day. She's like, I did this overnight. So can you talk a little bit about some of the different chronotypes? And then maybe for those of us who have coworkers or we are employers of these different chronotypes, how we can begin to recognize them and alter, let's say, maybe their work schedules to match that.
Mm-hmm. So it's actually interesting because that's how I ended up writing the book. So I'm going to take a step back and tell everybody, number one, if you want to figure out what your chronotype is, go to chronoquiz.com. We'll have it in the show notes, but it's super easy, chronoquiz.com. And basically, if you type chronotype into Google, you pretty much come up with me anyway, because I'm the chronotype guy. So that's number one. So what are chronotypes? These are genetic. So a lot of people don't think that they are, right? So a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to wake up early and become an early bird. Good freaking luck, okay? Because it's just not in some people, right? And so it turns out there's 74 different markers for sleep. There's one in particular that really I like to look at most, and it's not the only one, but it's probably the best one for this example. It's called the PER3 area of the human genome. And so what we see is a single nucleotide polymorphism, or what's called a SNP. So what happens is it's supposed to have certain building blocks are supposed to be in an order. When it's flipped one way, you turn into an early bird. When it's flipped another way, you turn into a night owl. When it's correct, you're in the middle. So this has been well known, well established. So I had a patient who came in, very interesting woman. And I want to be clear, I failed. I mean, I failed. We couldn't get her. We tried every cognitive behavioral therapy. We tried drugs. We tried it all. So I said, come back in. Let's chit chat. I'm the diehard clinical interview guy. I'm going to figure it out with enough questions, as long as I just keep asking questions. And so she turned to me and she said, Michael, I wish I could sleep in. This was when I was practicing on the East Coast in Georgia. She said, Michael, I wish I could live in California. Like, what do you mean? She said, California time is perfect for me. I can go to bed, later here and it's earlier there. And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, so why don't we just change around your schedule? And she said, well, I got to be honest with you. What would be ideal is if I woke up at 9 and I went to work at 10, and then I worked from 10 maybe till 6 or 7. And then I came home and I was like, great. And she said, my husband won't stand for it. My kids won't either. And my boss won't either. So she's like, I don't think there's a universe where this can happen. I said, well, can I call your boss and ask? She said, I don't know. He's probably going to fire me at the end of the week. I was like, come on, how bad could it be? So I called her boss. Sure enough, he was like, you can do whatever you want. She's fired on Friday. This was Monday. So no pressure, right? So I had her coming in at 10 and leaving at 7. I called him on Friday. The first words out of his mouth were, I got 3 more employees I want you to talk to. Mm-hmm. So what was happening is she was an extreme night owl. Okay. She was somebody who her brain didn't go to bed until 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. So it was really hard to identify somebody like that. So once we started to understand a little bit more what was going on, I was like, holy crap, I wonder how many of my patients I thought were one thing turned out to be another thing, what we call a dolphin. So early birds, I changed the vernacular. So, I'm not sure why they called them bird names. Like early bird made sense. Night owl made sense. But in the middle, they called them hummingbirds. I never quite got that. I don't know why. And when we were working on the book, you'll appreciate this. When you're sitting around a table at the publishers and you're trying to figure out what to name this avatar, because basically we created a quiz and we wanted people to take the quiz and fall into a category so they could personalize themselves and learn how to kind of do this thing. So one person wanted crystals, one person wanted colors. I wanted animals because I figured animals are a good thing to relate to. Here's the thing. Nobody wants to be a porcupine. Nobody wants to be a platypus. So I had to find animals that not only were things that people would aspire to be, but also maintain the right chronotypical schedule.
And not be judgmental about it.
Exactly. So early birds turn into lions because who wouldn't want to be the queen or king of the jungle, right? Mm-hmm. So lions are my early morning optimists. These are oftentimes my COOs. These are people who like to make a list every day and go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. They like to wake up at 5:30 in the morning. And they're kind of militant in their thinking. I'll be honest with you, though. they're not much fun at parties because by 9 o'clock, they're dead. I mean, they've been up since 4:30 in the morning. So like socially, lions, it isn't so great. The middle ones are what used to be called hummingbirds. We call them bears. Bears are what I call solar sleepers. So they've got a good sleep drive, meaning they like to get up around the time the sun comes up and like to go to bed around the time the sun goes to bed, or maybe even a little later. But they're my go to bed around 10, 10:30, wake up around 7 o'clock in the morning people. Based on some of the things you've said, you might be a bear or you might be an early bear. I haven't decided yet.
Yeah, I think I'm an early bear. I wake up at about 6. Like I wake up somewhere between 5:45 and 6, and then I get up at about 6:15. Yeah.
So you might either be an early bear or a lion. I'll have to see. We'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah.
The third category is wolves, or they replace night owls. So I am a wolf. I have been since I was a very young kid. My whole family are actually wolves. I remember when I was 8 years old, I'd walk into my parents' bedroom at 11 o'clock at night, wondering why I'm up at 11 o'clock at night, but that's because I'm a night owl. And both of my parents would be there reading a book, watching television. All the lights would be on. It wouldn't be anything abnormal. So I've always been that way. We have a tendency to be the artists, the actors, the entertainers. Because when you think about it, when you talk to somebody who's in that creative place, they never say they got inspiration at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? It was always 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And that woman that you were talking about who makes a website in the middle of the night, right? Like that's the type of people that do that. So now, to be fair, I haven't told you anything that you don't already know, right? Early birds, in the middle, night owls, right? That's pretty standard. It's been around literally since the dawn of time. The part that I added were these people called dolphins. So interestingly, genetically speaking, there are people who have a genetic erratic sleep schedule. About 10% of the population. So this is not a small number of people. And my dolphins, I like dolphins because I don't know if you know this, dolphins sleep unihemispherically.
Yeah.
So, right, half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake looking for predators. I thought that kind of represented insomniacs, right? In sort of a nice way. And plus, who doesn't want to be a dolphin? Like they're the cutest animals ever, right?
And apparently more smarter than humans. I mean, that's what I hear.
So I've been told. So when you think about it, that turned out to be a category that made a lot of sense. But let me give you a little bit of basics on them. My dolphins are a lot like my lions. They get up very early. However, they've got a good bit of anxiety to them. They're oftentimes labeled as insomniacs. Sometimes they've got a little obsessive compulsive disorder, just a little. And a lot of times they're like the people who won't finish a project because it's just never done type of person. They might make a list and they would go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, and then they'd go through the list again from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. So they're very, rigorous in their thought process, but usually have a decent amount of anxiety behind them. Once you figure out what your chronotype is, one of these 4, and maybe you can just tell from the description that I've given here what it might be. Here's where the magic happens. Is it literally unlocks the perfect time of day to do absolutely anything and everything you possibly want to do. Yeah, I teach people the perfect time of day to have sex, eat a cheeseburger, ask their boss for a raise, go to bed, like literally you name it. And it's all based on hormones, right? So think about it. If you wake up early, let's say you're a lion and you wake up at 5:45, 6 o'clock. Well, your melatonin turns off, all your other hormones turn on, and they go in a very predictable pattern. Actually, it's such a predictable pattern. I can tell you what time of day the hormones are naturally in a place where you could do an activity and do it at your best. Here's the weird part. As a wolf, I have the exact same thing. Mine's just 3 hours later.
There's just a phasic shift that's happened. Yeah.
Exactly. So it gets super interesting really quickly. So let's say your partner is an early bird and you are a night owl, right? How do you communicate? How are you intimate? How do you talk to the kids? Like there's all kinds of different issues that get really interesting really quickly once you kind of have this secret key.
I love that. So how does, and one of the, as you were talking about some of these different types, I know that I have 3 boys. I have a 17-year-old, I have a almost 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. And my 17-year-old has really changed. So he used to be someone who got up a little earlier, and now he is not up before, call it 9 o'clock, on a school day, we're like, you're going to be late. So maybe there's another conversation to be had about shifting school times in high schools later, but can you maybe talk a little bit about how these chronotypes, let's say, change over the arc of someone's life, if they do at all? Because I know that my 12-year-old now, like the most juicy thing for him is like, oh my gosh, it's a Friday night. I get to stay up late. Like they just love this idea of staying up late. And I don't want to be up late. So
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
All right. So let me tell you about your boys. Okay. So number one, they sound awesome. I'm excited to hear more about them. The older one is doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing. So it turns out we have this thing called chronolongevity. Believe it or not, we go through all the chronotypes. So if you think about it, right, when your boys were babies, right, they were lions. They went to bed early. They woke up early, right? When they're toddlers and middle schoolers, they're bears, right? They're kind of going to bed when the sun goes down, coming up when the sun comes up, and you kind of start to understand. When they hit adolescence, they turn into wolves, right? So I don't know if you did this. When I was in high school, are you kidding? I never went to bed before midnight, 1 o'clock.
I was up all night.
Right.
I was up all night. Yeah.
Right. So, and that's, again, this is natural. And you mentioned school start times. This is a very important conversation that we can have at another time, which is we need to change school start times because lots of kids are falling asleep in first period when we should actually have them come to school a little bit later and they would do significantly better. Yeah. But again, very normal. So I want to be clear, both of your boys are in their normal phases. When your older son hits probably around 20, 22 or so, that's when he'll lock and load into whatever his quote adult chronotype is. But then when you hit, so I'm 54 years old. When you hit 55 age range, guess what happens? Your melatonin starts walking backwards. So you ever notice how your grandparents want to have dinner at like 5:30 in the afternoon?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's
even my parents now, they want to have dinner like really early. Yeah. They're turning into the grandparents. Yeah.
Exactly. So what's happening is my chronotype is now going backwards. So in the early stages, it appears to go forward, right? Lion to bear to wolf. Now it seems to be going, then you go through your existence. And then at the end, you seem to go from whatever it is to earlier. Right. So maybe if you're a wolf, you become a bear. If you're a bear, you become a lion, things like that. Dolphins are the people that I wrote the book for because they have the most messed up sleep. And so once I can usually get their sleep, kind of consolidated in one spot, even if it's only for 4 or 5 hours, then I can sometimes their true chronotype will come out or they just have a messed up chronotype and then we fix it.
And so as you're aging, let's say 50, 55, where we start to see this like stepwise decline in melatonin, is there an advantage then if you've done the testing and you can determine that there has been this change?
I would take melatonin at that point.
You would take, okay, that's my question. Would you start taking, is there a benefit to extending, let's say, the default chronotype that you are?
Yeah, I think there is. And it's not an unhealthy thing to do because so let me back up and do one caveat, which is I'm okay with you taking melatonin as long as your doctor knows it and as long as it's not affecting your other medications. Because remember, once people get to hit 55, 60, sometimes they're on a boatload of drugs because they got a lot of other stuff going on. So it's okay, but really be thoughtful about it. Also, Steph, can I go backwards a second? We're talking about melatonin. We were talking about melatonin in kids and how I said never, never, never. Yeah. I want to make one caveat there. There is significant data to show that melatonin in autistic kids and kids on the spectrum at higher dosages is highly effective. And so that is an area where we do see melatonin use in the 3 to 5 milligram range that can be very, very effective for them. But as a general guideline, I don't put melatonin in anybody under the age of 18 ever.